Hi Year 12, welcome to your video tutorial. This video tutorial is intended for Stage 6 software engineering students studying the first unit of work for Year 12, Secure Software Architecture. Credits for the content and the knowledge in these video and accompanying slides goes to James King and his online resource on eForge, as well as the Year 11 software engineering course credits listed here. Okay, the dot point today we are going to cover is explaining the contribution of cryptography to the security by design approach. Essentially, we're going to cover today different forms of cryptography and understand how they kind of fit into that proactive security approach when designing. Sandboxing is another concept covered in this dot point, but will be covered in a later video. Essentially, the practice of cryptography is about protecting information and communication. From my very quick Google earlier, the practice of cryptography was first encountered in the first instance of recorded cryptography was about 1900 BC. So this is something that is not just related to software engineering, but has been going on for a very long time. And it is the essential scrambling of messages or information to ensure that if it were intercepted, that it is not vulnerable. Now, what that looked like in 1900 BC, or even the very famous Julius Caesar cipher and the Caesar cipher, to what it looks like now has changed. But essentially, the same intention is there, that only the intended audience or entity can actually read or view the information, and should something go wrong, things are protected to a certain level. The first type of cryptography we're going to look at is encryption. And encryption is the process of converting plain text into something that is no longer plain text. And there are two types of encryption. Symmetric encryption, which isn't used too much anymore, which has a key. So if you encrypt something, you need to have a key in order to be able to decrypt it. Symmetric encryption has the same key for encrypting and decrypting. So Caesar's cipher, where it's one letter in the alphabet shifted, uses the same key to encrypt, so you use that key, that cipher, to encrypt it, and the same one to decrypt. So the person sending and receiving both have the same key. That's not used so much anymore. More common encryption is asymmetric encryption, which uses a public and a private key. Uses a public key, using a public key to encrypt and a private key to decrypt. So that's probably the one that needs to be broken down. Essentially, an asymmetric encryption, which AES, which we looked at before, uses asymmetric encryption, has a public key. The public key is used to encrypt the data. It is openly shared with anyone who needs to send the encrypted data to the owner of the key pair. It's called public because it's made available to anyone, allowing anyone to use it and anyone to encrypt a message with it. However, once the message is encrypted with the public key, only the private key can decrypt it. The private key is kept secret. Only it's known to the owner of the key pair. It's used to decrypt data that was encrypted with the public key. So if I encrypt something with the public and I'm the intended audience and it needs to come to me, I have the private key. So public, private, public, private. Here's an example. Alice wants to send Bob a secure message. Bob shares his public key with Alice. Alice encrypts her message with Bob's public key. When Bob receives the encrypted message, he then uses his private key. He didn't share the private key with Alice. It's his private key to decrypt it. So he goes, sure, Alice, you want to send me something? Here's the public key. I'm going to hang on to the private key. Public key, everyone. Private key must be kept by the owner. This ensures that even though the public key is freely shared, only the person with the matching private key can actually access the actual data. That's asymmetric encryption. Another really common type of cryptography besides encryption is hashing. Hashing is the process of converting data into a fixed set of strings, which is known as a hash value or a hash code. This is typically a random looking sequence of numbers and letters that is a designated length. When a user creates a password, the password is hashed before being stored in the database or in whatever server it's sitting on. If an attacker gains access to the database, even if they get it there, they'll only see hashed passwords, not the original one. So something like my password could actually look like that as a hash key. If the user later tries to log on, then how does it correlate these? The system hashes the password they provided and compares it to the stored hash. So when they put that my password in, before checking with the database, it again hashes it, and that hash should match what is stored in the database. If they match, the logon's successful. So they're not actually checking my password matches with my password. They take in my password, hash my password, and check the hash against the user database to check and see if that exists. Another example, another thing that you can actually do in this whole process is add a salt to add a level of complexity. And if you so wish, a lovely but AI-generated explanation of salts and hashing is available here if you wanted to have a bit of a further read about it. And that's it, guys. I suppose that's cryptography, encryption, and hashing. These things contribute to the security of the security by design principles and approach because they aren't necessarily essential for the system to function, but they take that mindset of constantly protecting, constantly on the front foot, constantly assuming the worst could go wrong.